Hey, it's Seth, your mortgage strategist, helping you get more transactions to the finish line. One of the more common questions I get from real estate agents is one that is oftentimes misunderstood, but how much should we ask for in seller concessions? Here's a quick rule of thumb. On most transactions, actually the third-party closing costs are often around that $4,000 give or take. That includes things like title fees, appraisal fees, credit report, flood certs, lender fees, recording fees, kind of all of the standard closing costs. And here's the part that a lot of people miss. Most of those closing costs are relatively similar, whether you're buying a $300,000 house or a $1 million house. Those costs can oftentimes be within a couple $100s. So then we have prepaid items above and beyond that. Prepaid items are different from the closing costs because those are things like homeowners insurance, prepaid interest, property taxes, setting up that escrow account, any HOA dues. Sometimes those take a few months in the transition, anything having to do with the timing of the property. Those prepaid items can vary quite a bit depending on the day of the month the buyer closes or insurance quotes that come in, HOA requirements. But as a practical estimate, I usually like to think prepaid items are roughly that $4,000 to $6,000 on many files. So a good round number is this. If you're asking for about $10,000 in seller concessions, that's oftentimes a pretty good standard and useful amount to help cover those closing costs and prepaid items. But if you're negotiating more than that, it's probably a good idea to have a strategy surrounding that. Additional concessions may be used for things like temporary buydowns or permanent rate buydowns or prepaying HOA dues, some of those other allowable costs. But it's an important reminder, buyers cannot get cash back at closing. So that extra money, or if there's anything left over, has to be given back, or we have to renegotiate or reduce or restructure. So strategy does matter from the beginning, and there are certain nuances when it comes to those concessions, specifically when it's tied to inspection items or repairs. For example, if the seller is doing the work before closing, then that can oftentimes be paid by them. Or if the buyer's doing the work after closing, kind of depends if it's health or safety issues, what that entails. Do we have to escrow for it? Or is it reasons that we have to get it done before closing because of appraisals, etc.? So we want to check directly on all those things as they do matter to the transaction. But another rule of thumb to kind of estimate as you're thinking about seller concessions is what are the maximum limits? Depending on loan types, occupancy, down payment, there are limits to seller concessions. But as a general rule, if it's 3% or less for primary residences, that oftentimes is allowable. Sometimes FHA and VA allow more than that. If the occupancy is an investment property, then oftentimes that's going to be capped at 2%. We do have certain programs that can exceed that if we need to, but it does change the program that's moving forward. So the bottom line is this: when you're asking for concessions, we want to make a strategy. We want to know the buyer's closing costs, prepaid items, the specific loan program that they're trying to negotiate. That will help you as you're setting up negotiating from the beginning to improve either the payment plan, reduce cash, strengthen affordability, all things that are helpful to a buyer. But the wrong structure can definitely create issues if it's later in the process. So we want to make sure that we're having those conversations up front. How much should we ask for, and how do we submit from the beginning? Let's build a strategy together before that contract is signed. Look forward to talking to you soon.